This is The Lid Is On, the UN's flagship news podcast. I'm Conor Lennon. This episode is going out on the 24th of February, a year on from the Russian attack on the country. Denise Brown is the resident coordinator in Ukraine, the most senior UN official in the country, and she's joining me from Kyiv. Hello, Denise, and thank you for joining me today.
No, thank you.
First of all, let's talk a bit about where you are. I can see you're in a room somewhere, I presume, in the UN headquarters there. What are conditions like for you right now?
Conditions have been pretty difficult here over the past couple of months with the winter, though it was milder than expected, but it's the same for all Ukrainians. So the cold, the constant air sirens, dashing in and out of the bunker all day long, holding meetings in the bunker. We've had to adapt to some pretty extreme circumstances here in Ukraine.
Well, yeah, so you said you have to go down to a bunker, you have to have meetings in a bunker. What's that like? Does that mean that everyone in the building has to rush out when the air raid siren goes and head downstairs?
Yes, absolutely. We all do that. We have one large bunker which can fit, I think, over about 100 people. I've done interviews in that bunker. I've had humanitarian country team, UN country team meetings in that bunker, talked to member states in that bunker. We calculated, over the past 12 months, more than 1 month in that bunker. We spent a lot of time there. We have around 2,600 UN staff, 60% of whom are Ukrainian. So the UN in Ukraine is also Ukrainian. Extremely competent, dedicated individuals who are contributing to alleviating.
And explain a bit more about what your particular role is and what a typical day looks like for you in a country at war.
Yeah, I'm afraid there is no typical day. There's a whole lot of my day which is unpredictable. I think the day that will stay with me for a long time, which is now a typical day, was the 10th of October with the airstrikes in Kyiv, in the center of town. One of them about 1.2 kilometers from my office at 8:20 in the morning, when I heard that explosion and the office started shaking, and thought, "Ooh, now would be a good time to get into that bunker." It was actually the first time. So now a lot of our days are taken up with those air sirens, with being in the bunker, with also, the day-to-day of what we're doing, which is delivering for the Ukrainian people. And right now, our major focus is on delivering as close as possible to the front lines. There's a lot of planning, a lot of coordination, a lot of discussion in order to get the supplies as close as possible. And we're getting very, very close to that front line.
And you were in the front line towards the end of last year. I know you went to Kherson and some other cities in the area. What were your impressions of that area? What life was like for people who were living in those conditions?
I go regularly to the frontline communities because I'm really insistent that the UN staff do these most difficult deliveries. We have the capacity, the experience, and the resources and the know-how to do it. So they spend a lot of time, and I spend quite a bit of time in places like Kherson, but also Kharkiv and Zaporizhia and Donetsk. Kherson, I think, is the one that strikes me the most because in November there was such hope when it was retaken. We were in there 3 days after it was retaken. It was quite a moving day, and people were out on the streets. President Zelensky was there. We came along behind with trucks full of supplies. And, several months later, as you saw last week, there were continued airstrikes in the middle of the city, civilians who were killed, volunteers who've been killed. It feels like it's never ending in Kherson. But also what's never ending in Kherson is the strength and the hope of the people who stayed behind and who won't leave and who've told me, and I've spent enough time there to know that they are not going to leave. This is their home. And so this is a real testament also to the strength and conviction and resilience of the Ukrainian population.
But some cities, as we're hearing from Ukraine, practically don't exist anymore. They've been razed to the ground. There's nothing left.
That's true, and I've seen that when I was on my way to Seversk near Solidar in January. Along the side of the road were communities that have been completely flattened. But they will be rebuilt, and I'm convinced that the determination of the people of Ukraine will lead to these cities and these communities in these more remote areas being rebuilt. It may take a long time, but again, the courage and the determination to make that happen is very prevalent here. It's something that strikes me in all of the places that I visit. It's no one here is defeated. Let me put it that way.
Have you had much opportunity to talk to some of the people who are living in these areas? And are there any particular exchanges that really struck you?
Yes, absolutely. When we go, and when I go, I spend a lot of time talking to the local authorities, the mayors, the people in the community. I think there are perhaps two individuals that I met who really stayed with me, and this is the mayor of Kyiv, which is in Zaporizhia, about 3 kilometers from the front line, and the mayor of Kherson. Both of these mayors are women and who have stayed behind to take care of the communities. And they are our primary interlocutors. We're in constant contact with them, not necessarily myself, but the teams. And when I've met them, the shelling, particularly in Kyiv, was constant when we were there. I was on the ground for less than 3 hours. We counted at least 20 strikes, anywhere from 5 to 10 kilometers away. So it's just a constant boom, boom. And there's this fantastic woman named Svetlana who was organizing the offloading and where to put the supplies, took me to her bunker where she set up her office. And she is determined that she will remain there and support the people who stayed behind. And it's the same for the mayor of Kherson. And Kherson goes through daily airstrikes. It's daily. When I was there 2 weeks ago, there were 2 strikes targeting some of the systems, again, civilian infrastructure. And she's just going around and ensuring that the people who stayed are taken care of. So these are women who I've met who are courageous and who I think I will never forget.
Now, the humanitarian needs seem pretty overwhelming. Over 14 million people displaced from their homes, around 40% of the population needing some kind of humanitarian aid. As we speak right now, what are the main humanitarian needs in Ukraine?
There is not one main need, but the most acute situation is close to the front line, where houses are flattened, clinics are destroyed. As we saw in Vovchansk a couple of weeks ago, a clinic that I visited in mid-January, a month later, was destroyed. So they need everything. They need everything in these communities. So we are very much focused on those deliveries. We're also very much focused on the psychosocial trauma, particularly for children, and putting in place where we can support for these children. But that becomes increasingly difficult the closer we get to the front line, because our presence there, or the national actors' presence there, which is absolutely tremendous, depends on how many missiles are falling that day.
What would your message be to donors to ensure that you get that money?
The war continues, and the war is intensifying. So as long as the war continues, we can reasonably expect that the population is affected by the war. That suffering continues, and until that war is over, we have to continue to support the people of Ukraine who are living through this.
Yet the prospects for peace in the short term don't seem to be very strong or encouraging. I often see this phrase, war of attrition. Do you think we're going to be having a similar conversation to this one in February 2024?
I really hope not.
And just one more question for you. The UN has called for safe and unhindered access to all parts of the country to deliver aid, life-saving aid in many cases. Can you tell me what kind of access you currently have?
We have access to all parts of the territory that are controlled by the Ukrainians. We don't yet have access across that front line. It is something that we request very regularly to both the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine and Ministry of Defense of Russia. We consistently receive a positive response from the Ukrainian side. We have not yet received a similar response from the Russian side. It's essential that we have access across that front line. We'll be able to go tomorrow if I get the green light, but I need those guarantees. We are taking quite a few risks here, and to send people across the front line to assist people who I am convinced are in a desperate situation requires some kind of guarantee. And I'm really hopeful that that will come.
Well, Denise Brown, thank you so much for speaking to us today. We really appreciate it, and we wish you and the team out there all the best.
Thank you very much.